Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Just Saying Football with Jack and Sean. I'm your host, Sean Gannon, alongside my partner, Jack McNicholas. We're here to bring you news, notes, weekly updates, and game analysis of your favorite teams from around the league. Now, the chance, go check out our website, justsayingfootball.com. Follow us on Instagram at JustSayingNoGWJS for article and video updates. And don't forget us in your ears on Spotify at Just Saying Football. We are in Week 6. Vikings and Texans are on a bye. Jaguars are coming off of a huge Monday night win. It is weird times, so get your fantasy lineups set. I know nobody knows who's going to boom each week, but that's the beauty of fantasy football, friends.
Yeah, man. We had two insane primetime underdog comebacks. You know, we were talking about the dogs last week. You had some big calls last week on your underdogs. You know, we'll get to that as well. The Giants were really the only underdog that, didn't come through for us the whole day. But the main thing here, you know, the Patriots are looking good, the Jaguars are looking good, the AFC is getting tight, and we're in Week 6. So, you know, you're looking at some of these guys, and, you know, you got 1-4 records, you know, 2-3. This is the week to win for some of those teams.
Yeah, Bills losing to the Patriots. That changes the dynamics of the AFC East, especially with the very weak Jets and Dolphins team. Something that we'll get into in a little bit. But let's get into our Thursday night football when the Philadelphia Eagles make their way to New York to take on the Giants. Eagles favored this by -6.5 and over-under here of 42.5. Giants coming off of that 4-turnover second half, which ended up costing them the game. I got to go with the Eagles on this one, bub. There's a lot of conversation around A.J. Brown and his relationship with Jalen Hurts. They had a very long meeting. Is he going to be available during the offseason for a trade? Is he going to be available during the season for a trade? And a lot of question marks. I think this is one of those weeks where the entire Eagles organization says, let's put that to rest. It's going to be a pass-heavy day, and it's obviously Saquon coming back to MetLife again. You can expect a big day from him.
Yeah, right now it's, you know, the Giants have not had the Eagles number the last couple of years, and the Eagles, you know, despite their loss last week, and they're kind of shakier offense than we expected this year. The Giants were shakier last week. You know, we expected them to come up to the Saints and you know, out to the Saints and just beat them. But the main thing is, you know, when you have 4 turnovers, you literally can't win that way. You're giving up big plays on your own goal line. The Eagles take advantage of that. So I'll take the Eagles as well. I hate to see it. I think this is an absolute over in every Saquon way this week. You know, take, 100 yards, take him for receiving. I mean, fantasy, obviously, is a huge start, but I'm loving what the Giants are doing. There's just a lot of injuries and a lot of questionable stuff in the second half last week that kind of takes the bad taste out of your mouth from the win last week.
Yeah, Giants are one of the more injured teams in the NFL, along with the Vikings. So we know what that's like. All right, moving this into Sunday, 9:30 a.m., Denver Broncos taking on the New York Jets. This is happening in London. Denver's favored us by -7.5 and over-under here of 43.5. I think we can both comfortably say it's Denver Broncos country while they're out there in London. This Jets team just is allergic to offense, it seems like, year in and year out. And despite having a good defense, they have 0 interceptions so far on the year, which is insane and not a statistic you thought you'd say with a guy named Sauce Gardner on that team. But I'm locking in the Broncos.
Yeah, Broncos on the road. We saw Dallas go right into New York and dominate last week. This Jets team, 0-5, it is tough. So you're looking at this team right now. A lot to work on. You know, Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson seem to be the only things working. Breece Hall had a good week last week, but the injury to Braylon Allen, obviously not great. Broncos look like they're firing on all cylinders, and there's no way they're not feeling good after that win against Philly. So give me Denver all day in this one.
Also, keep in mind, Chargers and the Chiefs just lost. There's a chance and an opportunity for the Broncos to maybe take a little bit of a chokehold early on in this AFC West as the season continues. Moving this along, Arizona Cardinals making their way to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Colts favored by -6.5 and over-under here of 46.5. Now, DeMarco's fumble right at the goal line obviously led to this Titans comeback for the Cardinals. Jonathan Gannon was visibly hitting him in the chest. He came out earlier today, Tuesday, to apologize for that. Either way, now what you want to see from the Cardinals, giving the Titans that first win, I have to go with the Colts. Jonathan Taylor, 3 touchdowns last week. He's looking like it's, 2021, 2022, and he was just unstoppable, scoring 20-plus touchdowns. I just think it's that weird Colts year. This team looks great, top down. I was not expecting them to be this good, and they are that good.
Yeah, we weren't expecting him to be that good because, we thought Anthony Richardson was going to be starting for them. But now, in Indiana Jones out there, you got, like you just said, and I remember you texted me, last week, is this the season that he goes for 600 yards, 1,600 yards, sorry. He's going to be at 600 yards probably next game. He's leading the league right now at 480 yards through 5 games. And even though he had the 3 touchdowns last week, he didn't crack the 100 mark. So I expect him to maybe be able to do that this week. The Cardinals just have to feel absolutely deflated after that. That was a mind-blowing loss. There's no other way to say it. They're on the road this week, and they got to defend the Indianapolis Colts with no run game of their own. I just don't think this is going to be sustainable for the Cardinals right now. They're definitely in a way that I could literally see them going through another rebuild after this season. It's week 5, though. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But Indy minus 6.5, that is one of the easiest plays you'll get all week.
Yeah, one thing about the Cardinals, I do feel like, to your point about the rebuild, Kyler Murray might be one of those names in the offseason that gets traded. Steelers are one of those teams that's going to need a quarterback. Just saying, with 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, there's a chance for the Steelers to continue this trend of just getting veteran quarterback after veteran quarterback after the Kenny Pickett experiment did not work out so great. All right, moving this right along, Los Angeles Chargers making their way to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Chargers favoring this one minus 3.5 and over-under here at 45.5. Chargers had a tough loss last week, but the Dolphins had a worse one. I'm going with the Chargers here. I feel like Mike McDaniel's seat has to be getting quite hot. It's definitely starting to bubble up. It's the very beginning of the pasta boiling where bubbles are happening. It's going to start to boil soon if something doesn't change, and I'm thinking it might be him that's going to be the change. So it's a tough one for the Dolphins right now. Tough to take that loss against the Panthers, but I just think everything with the Chargers have. They just made a trade for Ravens defensive end. God, what was his name? Why am I blanking on it? I have this written down on my phone. Adofa Owe. They went and made out a trade for him, which is going to help bolster their defensive line, which I think means that they can go deep into this playoff, especially with Khalil Mack coming back in just a few weeks. So I'm locking in the Chargers right now. I just think there's too much happening with the Dolphins. That's not good.
Yeah, man, they're 1-4. Last time that these two teams played was 2 seasons ago, and Miami won 36-34, absolute shootout. These two quarterbacks obviously drafted together in the 2020 draft, just in that Joe Burrow draft, and I think that they're both kind of on different strides right now. The Chargers kind of trying to beat the Chiefs out of their division. Miami looking, like you said, their coach looking like they're on the hot seat. The Chargers are traveling this week, and they're still favored. I think that is something to be noted. Just that is going to be a long trek for them. But I will say, if Mike McDaniels is falling to 1-5, you could really be looking at, something going on with Tua. But Jalen Waddle came through last week, so I feel like he is just going to have to get as involved as, people were saying. People were saying that he has to be the number one wide receiver. But the Chargers, Lab McConkey scoring last week. He had a punt return taken away. The Chargers are on all cylinders. They're going to have to throw a lot, and Miami sucks at defending the pass. So, but Amari and Hampton out for 4 weeks too is something to note. There's going to be probably a lot more passing volume next week in the Chargers offense.
Yep, couldn't agree with you. All right, let's keep this moving along. We have the Cleveland Browns making their way to Pittsburgh, take on the Steelers. Steelers favored this by minus 5.5, with an over-under here of 38.5. Now the Browns are coming back from this London game. Steelers are coming off of the bye where they took on the same team in the Minnesota Vikings just 2 weeks earlier in Dublin. What are your thoughts in this AFC North showdown?
Yeah, man. I mean, you're looking at, the guy right now, the guy who's got 18-plus carries over the last 3 weeks, and Quinshon Judkins, 110 on the ground last week, and you're looking at him just completely different. It just shows how fast things move in the NFL. This guy is just absolutely dominating. The fact is, in the last 3 matchups, Cleveland's 2-1 against the Steelers, and they were both at Cleveland. So the problem here for me is this game in the Steelers' favor right now, 3-1. The Steelers trying to stay hot with the Bengals and the Ravens dealing with injuries. But I will say, I'm going to take the Browns as dogs this week. I think that it's going to be a low-scoring game. It's the lowest over-under of the week. I know we said that week 1 when it was an absolute shootout with the Jets, but these defenses are just too good. The Browns, they kept it close last week with the Vikings, who are a good team. So the Steelers 5.5, I would love to take that, but I do think Cleveland, you got to watch out for them this week.
Yeah, I got to go with the Steelers in this one. I think for me, I think they just have the better holistic team, both offensively and defensively. Shadir Sanders also just moves into quarterback two with the trade of Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think it's hard to go U.S. London back to the U.S. for 3 straight games. I think this Browns team might be a little bit more gassed than what people are expecting. I think that might bode well for the Steelers when they're at home. They're going to have the crowd. This is a low-scoring game for a reason, 38.5. And I think it's because they both know that the offense of the Steelers team isn't necessarily great, and neither is the Browns team. But this Browns team has to be just gassed after playing a game and all this travel.
Yeah,
there's a lot of time to fight. You got to get your body adjusted again. You got to get back into practice. Let's say you go back to Ohio, then you have to go to Pittsburgh. I know it's not necessarily as far, but it's traveling on your body. It's wear and tear on your body. Things to keep in mind. So I'm going to lock in the Steelers with that coming off of the bye week. Moving this right along with the San Francisco 49ers making their way to Tampa Bay to take on the Bucs. Bucs started this one -2.5 and over under here of 46.5. 49ers got the huge win last week against the Rams, which shocked everybody, including us. Of course, everybody questioning whether Mac Jones should be the starter, and he was very calm, cool, and collective and was like, I'm here to be Brock Purdy's backup at the podium, which, there are going to be some teams out there in the offseason that are like, this is why we want you on our team, because you're a team-first guy. That all being said, I'm locking in the Bucs. I think that Baker Mayfield and this offense are just playing electric, and each single one of their wins have come within the fourth quarter and within one score. This team is built to win in the last seconds. They have a chokehold on the NFC South. I think it's going to continue. This 49ers team is still 50-50. They have a lot of injuries. We don't know what we're going to get week in, week out. I still think that there's some concern when it comes to the 49ers long term. It was a great win last week, but let's see if they can get consistent. That's something that we haven't seen with them this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the Niners just to oppose you and kind of look at that point of view in the sense that, they just won that game against the Rams. Nobody was expecting that. We were talking about it last week. Just, it was one of the easier ones to look at with Mac Jones starting. But Brock Purdy, if he's returning in this one, I think that they want to get the offense right. Kyle Shanahan, honestly, the Bucs are really the play here just because they're at home. They have all that move, but when you have the way the Niners are just scheming for teams right now, you can see how their defense is adjusted without Nick Bosa and Christian McCaffrey. Even though he's not getting involved in the real run game, I don't even believe he's cracked over 65 yards in a game this year rushing, but he's had 6 receptions in every game. So hopefully, they're 4-1 for a reason right now. They're a good team. They just have a lot of depth that are kind of sneakily becoming their starters. So I'll take San Francisco in this one. But my boy Emeka Egbuka, Sean, we got to roll the tape from week 1 because last week,
electric.
One of the best games you'll see from a rookie ever.
Won me a fantasy game thanks to that performance. Absolutely incredible. All right, moving this right along. Dallas Cowboys make their way to Carolina to take on the Panthers. Dallas is favored in this by -3.5, with an over-under here of 48.5. I'm locking in the Cowboys. No offense to the Panthers. It's just last week was, I feel like, kind of lucky. I don't think that's going to be the same case. Dak, look, we can hate him or love him. He's playing consistent. He's playing well. And I think he knows that it's all on him right now with all these injuries. George Pickens has stepped up with the CeeDee Lamb injury. Javonte Williams looks great. I'm comfortable taking the Cowboys in this one handily. I'd even take the point spread at 3.5. I feel like they're going to win this by a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, they definitely have the juice right now, and coming off of that win against the Jets, how could they not feel good? Everybody is firing on all cylinders, like you said. Carolina, obviously, you see some shine out of them last week, finally getting Xavier Legette looking like he's a real first-round pick like he is. But right now, without CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys are definitely adjusting to Pickens too much for me to have anything but confidence in them going into this week. So I'll take the Cowboys, nice and simple, but, big shout-out to the Panthers because they do look like they're fixing themselves. And Rico Dowell last week, waiver wire pickup of the week, 201 yards on the ground. Enjoy that because I got a little piece of that, but that was not what I was expecting when I realized I was picking up a backup running back last week.
I don't think anybody was expecting that. But moving this right along, we have the Seattle Seahawks making their way to Jacksonville to take on the Jags. Jags favored this by -1.5 with an over-under here of 44.5. I was worried about Sam Darnold in this offense. They have put that to rest for me. I am not as worried as I was. He looks great for this team. 4 touchdowns last week despite the loss. It was not because of his poor performance or anything because of him. Just an outright team loss, an outright team win by the Bucs, and that's happened. Those are, you never want to you never want to take a loss, but those are losses at least you can somewhat live with. Obviously, you're still upset with that. You want that win when you have those performances, but I'm locking in the Seahawks. There's something about this Jags team, despite this 4-1 start, that I'm like, when is this wheel going to fall off? You know, like, when is this curtain going to fall on this team? And the reality of it, it's here, because that was an ugly win against the Chiefs. A win, but an ugly win.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was an ugly win, like you said, just like Trevor Lawrence's game when it was looking ugly. And the Seahawks, they are looking good. I will say, we've been talking about how the travel is starting to affect these teams. You can kind of see it last week. And for me, I'm going to take the Jags at home this week, just to even out my 49ers traveling pick right there. But, Jacksonville, they showed some shine last week. I think that they're going to try to force themselves not to use Trevor on the ground as much as they did. But I'll take them. I think this will be a close game. Both of these teams honestly kind of play a little similar style. They're both like committee RBs, pocket passers. They both have a premier wide receiver one, even if Brian Thomas Jr. is not going to get used like that. But they're built the same. I like Jacksonville in this one, but I do like the Seahawks season long better than the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, the NFC West, it's going to be heating up, especially with the Rams in there. And speaking of the Rams, they're making their way to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Rams are favored in this one, -7.5, and an over-under here of 44.5. It does not look like Lamar Jackson's going to be in for this one, as he still is nursing and coming back from the hamstring injury that he has, as he should take his time. This is a 1-4 Ravens team. I'm locking in the Rams. They had a surprise loss last week, but the Rams are absolutely electric. I still think they're one of the best and most complete teams in the NFL, despite the loss last week. This Ravens team, the defense does not look good. The offense does not look good. Even Derrick Henry does not look good. I'm getting close to hitting the panic button on this team.
I know this may be an L season for them. I mean, I was sitting there watching the games last week, and I just get a tap on the shoulder. My buddy's like, "Look over at the Baltimore game," and there is nobody in the stadium as they're coming out of half. I was shocked, but they kind of felt it in the first half. When you got a guy like C.J. Stroud being the number one fantasy QB against you, you got to start thinking about what's going on. We knew last week that they were way too injured. The Rams are going to be on a little revenge tour right now. They just lost to a division opponent in prime time that they were favored by this much. They want to get it done this week. Stafford right now leading the league, 1,503 yards on the season, and Puka right now is leading the league in pretty much every receiving category possible. So I think he continues to dominate both of them against this team.
He's so good, Puka, I will say. He is just having a hell of a season. Moving this right along, Tennessee Titans making their way to Las Vegas, take on the Raiders. Raiders fighting this one -4.5, and over-under here of 41.5. Titans got their first win of the season last year, first win for Cam Ward in his career. Raiders just couldn't do anything against the Colts last week, and Geno Smith continues to turn the ball over.
Yeah, we're not supposed to be, Sean, at week 6 at the point where we start talking about boring-ass games, but this one is either going to be the greatest game of the week or it's going to be the worst game to watch. Give me, I'll take Vegas with you in this game. I think that they have, a little more juice. Genty's getting going right now. Yeah. The Tennessee Titans, it's one of those things where we're like, it's going to take a miracle for them to get a win, and they literally had like 3 miracles happen in the fourth quarter in their favor last week.
The ball falls in the end zone, and it's up to grabs. That's a touchdown,
old man
baby.
Tyler Lockett getting that game winner, just like everybody drew it up.
It's exactly what I had in my bets, all right, guys? I'm going with you, though. I'm absolutely locking in the Raiders. I just think that, if the Raiders don't win this one, start again.
What are we doing?
move again. Go.
They got to be the only team that's rebuilt 12 times in 10 seasons.
Yeah, or at least always, it's tough to be a Raiders fan, and I'm so sorry for all of them. All right. Moving this right along, we have the Cincinnati Bengals making their way to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Packers are favored this one -14.5, and over under here at 43.5. And the reason why I think it's like that is because the Lions handed them a huge loss, the Vikings handed them a huge loss. Basically, everybody is handing the Bengals huge losses. Stat came out that Jamar Chase has more tackles than touchdowns. So yeah, I'm locking in the Packers.
Yeah, that was crazy last week. They said that he had 2 catches last week, and he had 3 tackles in that game, all 3 on Jake Browning interceptions. So you can't say that guy is not a hustler. But, I mean, obviously 2 garbage time touchdowns last week for Chase. Not discrediting him. The big one was all him. But 14.5. It's a big one here. And now they're getting Joe Flacco. This will probably be his short week in there, but I think they're done with Jake Browning. Chase Brown looks horrible. T. Higgins has like 12 catches in 5 games, even though Jamar has 32. It's a very imbalanced offense, and the Packers coming off the bye, getting some rest early in the season. You think Josh Jacobs is not going to go all over? We love that. Romeo Dobbs, and the Packers coming off a 40-40 overtime battle with the Cowboys just 2 weeks ago, and then get the bye. So they're hungry right now, probably top 5 team, and it's over for the Bengals already, boys.
Yeah, it's a tough one for them. They definitely had Super Bowl aspirations after signing that offense. All right, moving this right along. New England Patriots making their way to New Orleans, take on the Saints. Patriots are favored in this one with -3.5 and over under here 46.5. I said it every single week. Probably going to go opposite of the Saints, and that trend is going to continue. Lock in the Patriots. That was a huge win against the Bills. Obviously, it's in the division, so there's a little bit of extra stuff going on. But I think what we're seeing is that this Patriots team is legit. Stephon Diggs still has the juice, and I will comfortably pick them this week, especially against a fairly lackluster Saints team.
Yeah, and as we talked about early in the show, Spencer Rattler did not go 0-11 on his career. He's now 1-10 all time. And I did say the Colts have the easiest spread this week at 6.5, but it may be the Patriots. They just coming off a win with the Bills, who were undefeated going into that game. Drake May making some unbelievable throws across his body last night, flipping his hips, doing all the right things. And you're looking at him and he's loving having Stephon Diggs. He's loving having Hunter Henry. So you got to let that ride. New Orleans, tough place to play. But, I think that we got all of our New Orleans miracles out of the way against the Giants last week. But, I mean, Rashid Shaheed, our guy, is back, Sean. Get ready, people. If you don't have him, start him. It's time to Rashid Shaheed. The guy's going to get long touchdowns every week now. He's off that guy's coming off ACL, and he still looks faster than everybody else on the field.
Get him on your roster while you can. I started him last week. It paid off. All right, moving this into Sunday night football. Detroit Lions making their way to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Chiefs favored this by -2.5 with an over-under here of 48.5. Now, after this week, next week, the Chiefs will get Rashee Rice back for this team, so they are really trying to get to 3-3 if possible. Falling into that 2-4 hole, that's where you begin to start to get worried. And speaking of falling into that hole, I think it's going to happen because I'm going with the Lions. This Lions team is legit. I know the injury to Taron Armstrong, Armstead is something to be worried about for their secondary, but I still think this offense is firing on all cylinders. Amon-Ra St. Brown plays like a top 5 wide receiver. I want to see more out of Jameson Williams. He signed that contract. He only has 4 receptions in the last 2 games. It's like a Corvette just sitting in your garage with collecting dust. Like, you got to start to get it going, especially when you have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery scoring touchdowns like they did last week. But I'm locking in the Lions this one. I just think that they're more of a complete team right now. We're seeing the Chiefs, I feel like at some points in that Jags game, really just hoping that the deep ball from Mahomes would connect to something big and they'd get some points on the board and be right back in it. And I don't think that's the formula to win. It never works for me in Madden. Don't know why I'd work in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Kansas City. This is gonna be the week we start opposing picks because things are gonna get a little 50-50 with me here. Kansas City 2.5, and they're at home in prime time. We know they love playing in prime time. Obviously Kelsey got a tutty last week. Kareem Hunt got 2. Patrick Mahomes got himself 1. They still didn't get the win. Detroit right now, number 1 offense, 34.8 points a game. That's the best in the NFL. Kansas City only scoring about 25. So they're going to have to step it up a little bit from what they've been doing the last 4 weeks. I think they're going to have to control this game with the run game, and nobody does that better than Detroit. So, it's really on the Chiefs' defense that really did not get that done. If you watch that Trevor Lawrence play, everybody's not hustling. Chris Jones is just standing there. He's 2 times he's Super Bowl champion. This guy's got to be able to stop that. Goff gives them a little bit less. They'll be definitely not running the way they were last week, but that has to be contained. Have to contain the run game. Tyquan Thornton, big shout out to him. Literally looking at his stat line, his line last night was 16.5. He had 90 yards on his first 3 catches, so you got to give some respect where it's due. Rashee Rice, I think when they have him next week, Kansas City's going to start really turning their season around, but they got to get this win. They cannot fall into that hole that you talked about, and especially with the way we were talking about Denver and the Chargers, this is a big game for them.
Absolutely. You know that they're going to be bringing everything out, especially when they're in front of Chiefs Kingdom. All right, we have a doubleheader Monday Night Football, one at 7:15, one at 8:15. First one's Buffalo Bills making their way to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Bills favor this by -3.5, over under here 49.5. Both teams have a little bit to clean up here. Bills not able to get the win at home against the Patriots last week. A lot of people see them as the AFC favorite right now. On the flip, Atlanta just looks like a little bit like a mess. Outside of Bijan Robinson, who's the number 2 running back, I'm still just lean Saquon at the moment. They have to get it figured out, this Falcons team, because otherwise the Bucs are just going to take off with that NFC South crown.
Yeah, no, and we've been talking about, we love the Bucs. That was like our favorite pick to win this division, and Atlanta looked like a freaking mess before they got into their bye week, and they're benching Michael Penix. Now you got a game at home, you need to win, you're coming off the bye. You got the Bills in prime time, so not the matchup they were probably hoping for at this point. Big shout out to Dalton Kincaid this year, literally became Josh Allen's number 1 weapon. 287 yards through the first 5 games and 3 touchdowns. But like you mentioned, Bijan right now is, leading the Falcons in both rushing and receiving. I'm sure that nobody knows that better than them. So it's pretty good if we get it all done there with, the Bills. They just know exactly who they're going to have to attack. I think that's how they shut down the Falcons. And I think the Bills' defense is going to be the big step up here.
Yep, I agree with everything that you're saying. I think for me right now with the Falcons, I'm just a little bit worried about what their offense and the defense can do as a whole. Again, outside of Bijan, I think he's going to be fine. You can start him comfortably in fantasy leagues, that kind of stuff. But like as a whole, whether or not this team is going to win, it's so reliant on Michael Penix right now. And I do think that the sky's the limit for him. I do think that he could be a solid quarterback. Just right now, there's something off with this Falcons team. I'm not 100% sure what it is.
For sure.
This is a get-right game for the Bills. This is like a chance you have to get this win. Otherwise, you begin to worry a little bit. All right, moving this right along. We have the Chicago Bears making their way to Washington and take on the Commanders. Commanders favor this by -4.5 and over-under here of 50.5. Jaden Daniels, coming off the injury last week, gets the win against the Chargers on the road. He looks great. This team looks great. What can the Bears do, especially after they're coming off the bye?
Yeah, man, they definitely were planning for this one, and they, definitely saw the Chargers last week, get beat by the Commanders, and now the Commanders are all the way at home. Battle of the last year's top 2 picks, and we're looking at these two very differently. We're looking at Caleb as a guy in his second year, just trying to get a new offense down. We're looking at Jaden Daniels as a guy who's trying to repeat this greatness from last year. But you got to give a shout out to our boy Bill last week. 2 touchdowns, 111 on the ground. They continue to use the run game, and they're going to have to do that so that they can give Ben Johnson the least amount of time to get creative. But I do think coming off the bye is a huge advantage. Commanders had a battle last week with the Chargers, very physical game. I like the Bears just for that reason because they've had so much time to prepare and coming off the long week. Not like I would, it's just not the same matchup to me like Atlanta coming off that and having to face a mismatch with the Bills. I think that the Bears could go in here and beat the Commanders. I think they have the offensive weapons, and they definitely looked at the first 4 weeks like, this is what we got to do better. I think that, Washington's been beat up. No Terry. You can definitely see how that's affected the team. So I'm going to go with the Bears.
Yeah, last year this was one of those games that everybody thought the Bears were about to win. And then they didn't because of a Hail Mary from Jaden Daniels. There's a reason why this game is happening again. It's because of that one. I like Washington this one. I think that this team is great. I thought they might take a step back in year 2. They've actually done much better, I feel like, in some areas, especially with the injury. You're able to go 1-1. That shows that your team is putting it all together. Debo's looks solid when he is healthy and there. Hopefully Terry comes back fully healthy from that quad injury and is able to really complete this offense. But we're seeing them come together. Bill's looking great. I do think this Bears team is not something to sit on. I think this is like a great team. If you have O'Dunes, that's your clear wide receiver 1. You're starting him every week in fantasy. But I think that this Commanders team just has the edge slightly for me. They're going to be at home. They're going to have the home crowd. I like that for them. I'm going to lock in Washington in the second Monday Night Football. But if you're a fantasy football owner, get those guys in your flex. Get those guys to start later, so that we have some guys sitting for Monday Night Football. Get the little win, maybe eke out something, surprise everybody. That's what we're big fans of here at Just Saying. But that's all the time that we have. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you guys for checking us out. 6 weeks down. We got 12 more weeks of the regular season, so get ready and buckle up because this is where things are going to start getting crazy. So make sure to check us out, Just Saying Football, on Discord, on Spotify, YouTube, and all of our updates on Instagram, Just Saying No GWJS. Thank you guys for checking us out, and have a great week.
Enjoy.